Resident Evil Zero, a game that many people debate if it was a hit or miss. Welcome everybody, this is a Platinum Knight, and I'm going to be doing a Resident Evil retrospective series. Yes, I know this is very unoriginal, and it has been done to death, but I want to believe I can put my own personal spin on it. Resident Evil is my #1 favorite horror video game franchise, and I have been dying to make this series. I had a hard time if I should review these games by release or numbers, until I decided to go by numbers as I think it would be more interesting. So without further ado, let's start with the prequel to this horrific video game series. Originally supposed to be released on the Nintendo 64, Capcom eventually decided to scrap it and moved to the GameCube as it was shortly on its way. Looking back at some leftover footage for the Nintendo 64 port that never came to be, it's very interesting seeing how consistent it looks to the GameCube version while trying to connect with the original RE1. I really wish there was a way for everybody to play it, even if it's not much, similar to how many people want Capcom to release Resident Evil 1.5. As a child, when I first played Resident Evil Zero, I admit I thought it was boring and couldn't even get past the train segment, so I took it back to EB Games cause this was before EB Games changed their name to GameStop. After I took it back, for the longest time I didn't even think about playing it ever again, but after beating the GameCube Resident Evils from 1 to 4 a million times, for some odd reason, due to my fanboyish mindset at the time, I just couldn't accept a bad Resident Evil game. I love Resident Evil. How could I hate a game and a franchise that I'm a huge fan of? And so, I thought, you know what? How about I give Resident Evil Zero a second chance, and this time, play it all the way through. Back to EB Games it was. I remember an employee telling me they only had 1 copy left, and when I took it back home, the discs turned out to be the Resident Evil 1 remake, a game that I already had. EB Games actually gave me the wrong game. I guess you can say it was my fault for not checking, but I was just a kid. To be fair, Resident Evil Zero and Resident Evil 1 remake discs do look similar to one another. They're both in 2 small red discs. Yes, this was a time when Nintendo was trying to avoid piracy, but it's still the employee's responsibility to at least give you the right game. So I go back to EB Games again just to get the right discs, and it turns out they didn't even have any more copies of Resident Evil Zero, and I'm just like, what the hell? At the time, that was the only EB Games near us, which meant my only option left was the good old internet. My mom cleverly decided to go on eBay. Keep in mind, EB Games sold Resident Evil Zero for $35 used. My mom got it for $19, like new. Even EB Games weren't all that innocent. To this day, I still have my GameCube version of Resident Evil Zero. I even wrote in the S.T.A.R.S notebook. You see, this is why game companies should bring back instruction manuals, or at least small journals, because people like me actually use them. And that's when I was just a kid. Anyways, it's time to talk about the game itself. The story begins with the S.T.A.R.S Bravo team crash landing in Arklay Mountains of Raccoon City, investigating the strange murders. The game takes place right before the events of RE1 Remake, making this a prequel as the title suggests. Starting off in a stopped train, you play as both Rebecca Chambers, a rookie medic, and Billy Cohen, a wanted criminal who meet and join forces together to survive against zombies and bioweapons. As the train begins to move after encountering encountering a leech monster. Hey, a reference to the uncensored head falling off scene at the beginning of the original Resident Evil. Both Rebecca and Billy have their own special abilities. Billy carries a lighter and he can take more damage. However, I find it really odd how you need an entire kit to combine some herbs with Rebecca. This means Billy is unable to, which is kinda silly when you really think about it. What's so hard about ripping up a couple of plants and mixing them together? I guess Capcom tried too hard to give Rebecca a ability, especially medical related, seeing how she is supposed to be a medic. But wouldn't it have been better if Rebecca could revive Billy just in case he goes down, or being able to treat his wounds every now and then, just like she does in the original Resident Evil? Maybe it would have made the game way too easy, but it would have made more sense. I admit, giving Resident Evil 0 a second chance and playing for the first 2 hours, I felt like I was forcing myself to like this game, and in a way, I did. But the more I played it, the more I actually started liking it. After all, this is one of the last classic REs with fixed camera angles and pre-rendered backgrounds. Even with that being said, Capcom tried to do something different by introducing a controlling 2 players mechanic, which is what I think divided some fans the most. When it comes to having a partner with you at all times, it significantly does make a game less scary, but compared to Resident Evil 5 and 6 with its co-op modes, Resident Evil 0 can easily be forgiven seeing how another player cannot control the second player, which really makes me think how interesting it would have been if Capcom implemented a online co-op mode or a split screen feature for the HD remaster. After Rebecca and Billy stop the train, and once you reach the mansion, no, not the Resident Evil 1 mansion, it turns out there are 2 mansions in Arklay Mountains. This game revolves around Dr. James Marcus Mansion. The objective is to find 3 small tombstones to unlock the laboratory. This is where I began to feel I was finally getting somewhere. It was at this point I felt more comfortably familiar. Don't get me wrong, I do like the train, but not for a whole Resident Evil game. It was also at this point I would hopefully bump into an item crate, only to quickly realize there is none. Although I do like the idea of dropping your items, and at least they're marked on your map, but in my opinion, I would rather have an item box to stash all your goodies instead of dropping your stuff on the floor. Obviously it would have been nice to have both, and I'm no game designer, but I'm pretty sure it's a lot harder to program each 3D object to land in certain spots. Okay, here is my key space, my health corner, and my weapons and ammo corner. Wasn't really excited to move all my stuff to the laboratory either. Here's one cool feature. If you are injured and find some health, you can use it even if your inventory is full. I also really like how your partner's AI can defend themselves even when you are separated in another room. When it comes to enemies and bosses, obviously you got your typical zombies. Probably the worst enemies in the games are zombie apes. These little bastards are relentless. First of all, they're too small and fast, making them hard to hit. You get stun locked very easily. This would be okay in third person, but for a fixed camera angle game, it doesn't really work too well. Same goes to the giant bat along with its minions. Sometimes I don't even know if I'm hitting them. This bat is a lot easier to shoot in the Umbrella Chronicles. Speaking of the bosses, notice how most of them are either infected insects or infected animals, which is a reoccurring theme in the RE series to be realistic. But remember, this game has leeches that can formulate different shapes and appearances, kinda like the T-1000 from T2, so it sometimes makes me wish Capcom was just a little more creative of instead of beating the crap out of bugs and animals. I do appreciate how the hunters return like in most Resident Evils. The puzzles are so cryptic and can be mentally draining. Whether you're a fan or a gamer, we can agree or disagree that there is good and bad puzzles. However, I do not personally judge puzzles based on how long it takes for me to solve them. I judge them based on how creative they are, and I'm gonna tell you right now, most of the puzzles in this game are meh. They're okay at best, not great. Some puzzles are just too difficult to figure out. For an example, the animal puzzle. Oh boy, where do I even begin? The problem with this puzzle is you don't really get a whole lot of information. All you have is a small sign that sorta tells you, light the animal statues from weakest to strongest animal. The problem with this is, according to this game's logic, a poisonous snake is somehow stronger than a tiger. I understand if the snake bit the tiger, the snake would win, but a tiger is a lot bigger and could easily hold down the snake. And how is the eagle stronger than both the tiger and the poisonous snake? It sucks even harder even if you're standing in front of a statue and the lighter sometimes doesn't register. In my opinion, the best puzzle would have to be to stop the train segment. Yes, this puzzle is just two basic math equations that you can easily pause. However, being timed and having to run all the way to the back of the train while someone stays in the front is what makes this a little bit intense. Usually I do not like being timed, but here it just works. It's also interesting how the numbers you're supposed to add up to are different for each playthrough, similar to how Resident Evil 3 with their alternative playthrough mechanics. This means this puzzle always remains fresh. Okay, I admit, I missed the brake card the first time playing. This meant I went all the way to the back of the train, not being able to push the brakes. I was mad, but once you know not to forget about it and taking it with you, in my opinion, this would have to be the best puzzle. Unfortunately, the best puzzle is at the beginning of the game, and that's as good as it gets. It's intriguing as you explore the Marcus Mansion scene how this is supposed to be a prequel to the original Resident Evil. We learn how was Umbrella established, how was the T-virus created, and how did it break out. We even see how Umbrella tried to keep their bioweapons under control with torture and battle rooms and everything. Man, I swear, every time I enter this room, I always tell myself, oh, I wish I could use all these guns. After making it out of the mansion, placing all three tombstones in their rightful place, Billy and Rebecca head to the laboratory. On the GameCube, this is where you're supposed to insert disc 2, cutting out the train section. In the remastered version, switching discs is non-existent. Basic tip: make sure you bring the hookshot with you because somehow you're either supposed to know or go back and get it. When I started getting deeper down below into the laboratory after losing Billy momentarily, things started to look very familiar. That's right, it's the original Resident Evil 2 lab. I remember feeling like I bumped into an old friend or something. Although now that the Resident Evil 2 remake exists with the laboratory being completely redesigned called The Nest, this design is no longer canon, but at least it's still an iteration that exists in the reboot universe / Resident Evil 0 being canon with the remakes. One of the most interesting cutscenes is this scene.
Don't shoot! You're alive.
Are you okay, Rebecca?
Where is everybody?
They should have arrived here before me. Haven't you seen them? That's unfortunate. If we go straight from here, we should arrive at an old mansion which Umbrella uses for research. Come on, let's go.
Wait! I've got to find Billy.
Billy Cohen? You mean you found that criminal?
Yes, but we got separated and...
No point worrying about him. He won't make it. Come on, let's go.
Sir, please. I need to find him. Don't worry, I'll catch up with you.
Rebecca... All right. Just be careful.
I never saw him again.
The reason why this scene is always so intriguing to me is because this clearly implies that at least RE1 and 0 already happened, which really makes me wonder who was Rebecca telling her story to and when. It would have been cool to find out at the end of the game, but to this day I guess we'll never know. Say what you will about Resident Evil 0, but there is no doubt the developers did their best to put some passion into this game, and was pretty innovative for its time, like using pre-rendered cutscenes, putting small details such as different typewriter backgrounds that actually match up the room you are in. Even on the GameCube, I was really surprised as a kid how there is no long loading screen every time you switch characters. If I had to take a good guess how the developers achieved this, knowing this game used pre-rendered backgrounds freeing up a lot of space, this means at least 2 rooms are always loaded. Okay, so you've heard me talk about the story, the gameplay, the puzzles, and the enemies and bosses. Before I start talking about the ending of the game, I think it's time I delve deeper into the characters. Let's start with Rebecca Chambers, the main protagonist. If you played Resident Evil 1 before 0, then maybe you were like me. I got this unexplainable feeling thinking to myself, wow, Rebecca as a main character? Not in a doubtful way, but in a interesting way. I remember thinking, how will this all play out? Because knowing how she can barely defend herself in the RE1 remake or original, what will she do? Well, Capcom did a good job finding some loopholes and making her more resilient. Although there are some parts where the developers overdid it, Rebecca always came off as a nurturing, shy type of person trying so hard to be strong. Here, Capcom completely revamped her character into a more fearless warrior, and I find it really odd how she makes no mention of her previous journey in RE1. Billy Cohen is another interesting character. He is an escaped prisoner wanted for execution for killing dozens of innocent people. Spoiler alert, he's not guilty. He was actually framed. I remember watching this cutscene for the first time reminding me of Resident Evil 5. What makes Billy so interesting is he is one of a few characters that has never made a reappearance out of the whole Resident Evil series, and it's surprising how Capcom never brought him back seeing how he's been around since the beginning of this bio storyline. Fans have created many theories of what happened to him. My favorite is Billy becoming the Nemesis, but this theory has been debunked if you read the comics. Some fans believe he died while trying to escape Raccoon City, and a lot of fans just want to believe that he most likely lived happily ever after. However, Billy was almost going to make an appearance in Resident Evil Infinite Darkness when someone interviewed Hiroyuki Kobayashi, producer of Resident Evil 0 and Infinite Darkness. He had this to say: when working out the Panamstan plot, we did think about including characters other than Leon and Claire, at one point even considering bringing Billy in from Resident Evil 0, but he just didn't fit the setting. Sorry, Billy fans. As much as it would have been cool to see Billy in Infinite Darkness, I completely understand why they would reject the idea. By the way, I do think his mother love tattoo, a reference to the band Queen is a really nice touch. The next characters I would like to talk about is both Wesker and William Birkin. It's interesting to see how for the first time we actually get to see them working together. Albert Wesker sets up the events of Resident Evil 1 and William sets up the events of Resident Evil 2. It's also pretty cool how we get to see these cutscenes outside of character and showing us what happened behind the scenes. The last character I would like to focus on is the main villain himself, and that is Dr. James Marcus. Oh boy. You know, over the years there has been a lot of crazy wacky villains throughout this whole saga. Alfred Ashford dresses as his twin sister. Irving was just a crackhead. Wesker eventually became Neo from the Matrix. Raymond has a stupid haircut. As for the Leech Queen, where do I even begin? Shouldn't he be called the Leech King and not the Leech Queen? I mean, I understand he's mutated, but how would that give him a feminine singing voice? Was James a singer before he became a scientist? It's a man who controls leeches by singing opera. This would have to be one of the most bizarre, outrageous, yet humorous Resident Evil villains ever. Also, are we really supposed to believe that a leech that crawled into his dead body that turns him into the Queen coincidentally found him after Wesker and William betrayed him? Didn't they see that leech falling on top of him? Did they just let that leech go? You know, the specimen that created the T-virus to begin with? This really wasn't well thought out. Anyways, Wesker and Birkin backstab Dr. James Marcus by trying to kill him. He comes back to life with the perfect motive to get his revenge on Umbrella by causing the viral outbreak. Seriously though, why a singing queen? Whatever. After the laboratory is the treatment plant. Here it's up to Rebecca to save Billy after losing him from being attacked by a Eliminator, which makes me wonder if there was supposed to be an alternative for Billy to save Rebecca, like in the train depending on who turns on the power first. After you save Billy, it's puzzle time. Look familiar? Yup, it's a recreation of the floating crates and water puzzle from Resident Evil 2. Only this time it requires 2 characters. I like this puzzle. It's a nice callback, but it is a little bit convoluted. On a side note, I have to mention the soundtrack to Resident Evil 0 is amazingly and beautifully orchestrated. Another thing I found really cryptic is the whole chemicals nonsense. You have to collect and mix certain chemicals in order to solve things. This means if you do not have the right chemicals, you have to run all the way back to get them. Remember to always take a red chemical before you go down to the treatment plant, everybody, so that way you can mix it with the blue chemical and the industrial water to combine into the battery. I don't understand why Capcom thought Rebecca's mixing set was a good idea. Next, Rebecca and Billy fight Prototype Tyrant. This boss kinda threw me off at first because what exactly makes this Tyrant the Prototype? I can understand it going down with a couple of gunshots. The Resident Evil 1 Tyrant needed a rocket launcher to destroy, but how would Umbrella even test that without without killing either one of them. And what would have happened if the prototype would have withstood a rocket or two? Would the original Tyrant would have became the prototype? You would think Wesker would ask these questions. Damn, I really hate these frogs. If you do not have a partner with you to free you, it's an instant game over. Now we get to the final boss. When it comes to video game logic 101, I always find it funny whenever they transform into something more vulnerable when they were actually more powerful in their original state. The Queen's first phase isn't that hard. However, when you get to his second phase, oh my goodness, he is one tough bastard. You cannot kill him, only with sunlight. The objective is for Billy to defend Rebecca to open the roof, which is really creative. What makes the Queen's final form difficult is having enough ammunition to buy Rebecca some time. If Billy runs out of ammo, you're pretty much screwed. I will say this boss fight is actually really epic, especially with its brilliant soundtrack.
Evacuate immediately. Repeat.
Billy kills the Queen, they escape, and the Marcus mansion blows up. When I first saw this cutscene, as awesome as it is, I was not used to it. I want you to think about this from my perspective. Before Resident Evil 0, I played Resident Evil 1 through 4, and every single one of them ends using a rocket launcher or a launcher to defeat the final boss. So seeing Billy defeat the Queen with just a revolver, I eventually learned to appreciate how they changed it up a bit. After beating the final boss, we get to see Rebecca and Billy part ways. I got goosebumps seeing them do their iconic gestures to each other in reverse. Rebecca does Billy's military salute, and Billy does Rebecca's iconic thumbs up. It's pretty heartwarming yet breaking at the same time. To be honest, I did get a little emotional. After everything they've been through together working as a unstoppable team, they just split up. It makes sense why Billy couldn't go with Rebecca to regroup with Bravo team at the Spencer mansion, but they don't even talk about meeting up later on. Not one of them suggests, hey, how about we meet up at this location on this certain date at this certain time, or nothing. And if I had to be more honest, I'd ship them. But wait, there's more. After beating the game, you unlock Leech Hunter mode. It's one big scavenger hunt collecting leech charms scattered all over the mansion while fighting enemies in your way. You could say this is the equivalent to Mercenaries mode like in the other Resident Evils, only here you get to take your sweet time. You are not timed. It's a fun mode and makes it easier to earn special unlockables for the main campaign. Pro tip, I recommend you kill all the enemies first to clean out all the rooms, and then you can go back and pick up all the leeches. Resident Evil 0 is a modernized classic RE. It was the last time the series used pre-rendered backgrounds and tank controls. It was one of the last of its kind to have fixed camera angles. For many years I've been trying to figure out why is this game such a hit and miss for so many people, and I think I finally figured it out. It's because of its mixed pacing. A lot of you may not realize it. Sometimes this game is either too slow, too fast, not slow enough, or not fast enough. Plus you have to take care of two players at once. Most people people enjoy consistent pacing type of games. If you are a Resident Evil fan or into horror games in general and don't mind the mixed pacing, then I recommend you give this game a try at least once. But if you find this game a bit overwhelming, then you may not get into it, and I understand why Resident Evil 0 was a miss for some. As much as I do like this game, the more that I think about it, it kinda does fail as a prequel. We don't even get to know the S.T.A.R.S Bravo team. Ironically, we learn more about them in the original Resident Evil, and thanks to Resident Evil Village, we learn the true origin story of the T-Virus than the prequel itself.
Spencer, here. No way.
It really makes me wonder if the original concept of Resident Evil 0 was any different and Capcom decided to make some changes to the story at the last minute. I tried to find as much beta and cut content as I could. From what I was able to gather, there was going to be more custom parts for your weapons. I always thought it was weird how there was only one custom part in the whole game, which is the scope you put on your handgun. Originally, there was going to be suppressors for both handguns, a long barrel for the Magnum, a different stock for the shotgun, an alternative rocket launcher, upgrading your knife using Chemical X, being able to throw grenades, which could have been the alternative to the Molotovs, scrapped enemies such as the alternative to the Eliminators, which is the Dolly, and the Spider-Man. No, not that Spider-Man. This Spider-Man. A cut enemy that was also scratched from the original Resident Evil 2. Which, okay, I don't understand why Capcom didn't just put these arachnophobia-causing creatures in the remake, but whatever. A couple of other ideas that were scrapped was supposedly there was going to be multiple endings, just like the original Resident Evil. One ending was going to be Billy giving Rebecca the red bandana. That would have been cool, and it makes me wonder what were going to be those other endings. There's also scrapped rooms. Most of them are not so important, but one room that caught my eye was a classroom. Were we originally supposed to go to a school? That would have been awesome. Rather, these cut contents were designed for the Nintendo 64 version or the GameCube version. These ideas would have made Resident Evil 0 more interesting. Even with all of that being said, it's not a bad game. It's just not for everybody. It's an experimental addition to the RE series. As for me personally, it took a long time for me to appreciate this game, tolerating its mixed pacing, becoming fun and enjoyable. That is why it is considered a hit for me. I am giving Resident Evil 0 a 8 out of 10. It's no masterpiece, but it is a thrilling experience. If you're just getting into the Resident Evil series, I recommend you play Resident Evil 0 after you play the first game. I also recommend you play the HD remastered version, as not only can you play it in 1080p and with no tank controls, but Capcom added an additional Wesker mode, which I was heavily surprised by, and it looks like a fan mod. It's just Billy's model replaced with Wesker being able to use his powers, and Rebecca being in a Resident Evil 5 inspired possessed suit. They also added paid cosmetics DLC, which makes me wonder why Capcom didn't do the same with the RE1 remake. We get Rebecca's red bandana, her cowgirl outfit, the Nintendo 64 version of Resident Evil 0 Rebecca, Billy has a prisoner outfit, a fancy outfit, a combat outfit. Capcom even added Rebecca's gym clothes outfit based on Resident Evil 2's Wesker's Desk Easter egg, although I do find it a little biased how Capcom made way more outfits for Rebecca compared to Billy, so if you're going to play Resident Evil 0, the HD remastered version would have to be the best one. Alright everybody, that's it for my first retrospective review. I'm so sorry this video took so long to make. Things just kept on getting in the way, but I'm happy to finally say I got it done. Remember to give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit that notification bell for new videos. This has been your host, the Platinum Knight. Happy 25th anniversary Resident Evil. Thank you Capcom for the awesome memories. Peace out everybody. You have a good one. Like movies and TV shows? Then be sure to check out my movie channel at the Platinum Knight Watches. Are you into anime clips, compilations, and reviews? Then be sure to check out my anime channel at the Platinum Knight Anime. Enjoy watching live streams? Then be sure to check out my Twitch page and follow me at the Platinum Knight _.